The 6 to 7 Figure Show, episode 28. Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona, this is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
Everyone, welcome to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria, and today I am joined by Mahesh Grossman, who is the creator of the Superhero Entrepreneur Journey. It's a coaching program that helps entrepreneurs who are struggling with anxiety, depression, PTSD, and destroy the kryptonite that is causing their symptoms. He is someone who can help those folks reignite their superpowers, leap from tall buildings the way they used to. Grossman is a hypnotherapist who combines techniques from hypnosis, body-oriented psychology, psychodrama, and shamanic principles into a system that repeatedly produces lasting change. Mahesh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Frank.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a pretty important topic these days, depression, anxiety, PTSD, especially among entrepreneurs.
Yeah, a guy named Michael Freeman, a professor at UCF and UCSF, his survey of 242 entrepreneurs said 30% had depression, 27% had anxiety, and of the 30%, about half of those people with depression have both depression and anxiety.
Wow. Yeah,
so
I mean,
42% overall.
Yeah, that's 1 out of 2 almost, basically. Yeah. Every other person. So, I mean, just not to dig in too much to the science of this or the medicine of it, but I mean, what would be a typical scenario where an entrepreneur might be able to say, okay, this isn't just regular plain old life stress that's causing depression and anxiety. What kinds of things might they be looking for that it'd say, this is actually something bigger than that?
Well, there are a few different aspects. And of course, depression and anxiety are two different kind of situations. But,
sure.
If you're losing a lot of time avoiding what you need to do, it's not necessarily that you're, a lazy person. It's that there is so much fear and shame coming up under the surface that you don't do the work. It's not safe to do the work, because what anxiety does is put you into fight, flight, or freeze. But really, I haven't ran into any entrepreneurs who are fighting, but there are fleeing the work or they're freezing up. And I mean, I've experienced this myself for a number of years, actually. So, I mean, I had days where I would go. I had a ghostwriting business, and I'd be on a deadline for a book. It would take me until 2 o'clock to get to the Starbucks I wanted to work at. It would take me another 3 hours before I could actually get out of the car, because I had this tension coming up in my body that I was trying to get rid of. I'd eat dinner. I'd get to Starbucks at 6 finally, and I'd write a page for half an hour. And it was great. Half an hour for a page is not too bad, but then it would show up again. Yeah. So you have to, there are ways to work with this. And frankly, I found that most therapists aren't really that good at it. I have a history of sexual abuse in my background, and I was working with a therapist who specialized in men with sexual abuse. We're all anxious, and they say that sexual abuse is one of the major causes of PTSD. This guy gave me one technique for anxiety that was really not particularly effective. Like he said, put your hand on your chest and your belly. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't work.
So people may be experiencing these symptoms and dismissing them as, oh, maybe I'm just a procrastinator, or maybe I'm just lazy and maybe I'm not effective or something like that.
But one of the ways to test it is actually sit there and try to do the work and see what happens. So there's a lot of people have a fear of success or a fear of failure, which actually has anxiety underneath it.
Right.
But when you sit down to work with people with fear of success, if they're getting something done, it's very stressful to accomplish something.
Yeah. So it's that feeling like it's being frozen, essentially. It's like,
you'll find tension in your body, or your chest pain, or difficulty breathing. I mean, people with panic attacks. Your skin will get hot. There are all kinds of anxiety symptoms.
So it's not just that panic attack, because I personally would have like connected anxiety with like literally, breathing heavy, suddenly having like a little panic attack, but it might just show up as like the tension or fear of actually being able to do what I'm supposed to do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
That happens a lot. And I'm in a bunch of entrepreneurs group where I talk about this. I'm in a bunch of anxiety groups, and it really does paralyze people. Even people who are making seven figures. I was talking to somebody who had 2 7-figure businesses, and she still was overrun by issues around anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd imagine for folks that it's not being treated, I suspect the more and more successful they get, the worse it probably would feel for them, because they're further out on the ledge.
Right. Right. And then we all have imposter syndrome too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, okay. So that's fascinating. 1 out of 2, like this is literally, half the people listening to this could be dealing with this right now and probably not getting it treated in any way.
That's true. It's within the regular population, they're saying it's about 18%. Although this guy Freeman, what was really interesting was he had 27% of entrepreneurs and 26% of his compared populations.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and I'd imagine that in the entrepreneur population, they've got a slightly different than, it's not a standard slice of the general population. We entrepreneurs tend to be a little bit more high strung, I suppose, than most.
Well, what's really interesting is 49% of entrepreneurs had some kind of mental issue, if you included things like ADHD and OCD and things like that. So,
wow. That's amazing.
It's probably part of our makeup. We don't fit in with everybody else. We have to work for ourselves or be in charge.
Well, there you go. That's it. That's why one of the reasons why I wanted to have a T-shirt that says "unemployable" on the back.
Yeah.
So how? Let's pivot a little bit into how you work then with these entrepreneurs. You have a program. It doesn't sound like a sort of standard, therapy program. What kinds of things are you doing with these entrepreneurs?
Well, first off, it always has to be with the body. So I have techniques that involve more kind of a kinesthetic, because anxiety, you feel anxiety in your body, right? When you're anxious, you feel it in your body. Or if you're an overthinker, you're avoiding what you're feeling in your body.
Right.
That's really, if you're worried, it's really funny because, as entrepreneurs, we're taught to think about what keeps people up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Yep. That's how we write our copy, right?
That's right. That's true.
Who wants to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning worrying? So I have techniques that come from a combination of hypnosis that are quite kinesthetic and visually oriented. Things like imagining a fire hose coming from the center of your body, releasing the energy into the Grand Canyon. Things where you're, typically there's breathing things and stuff like that most people do with anxiety. But what I do kind of takes it to a whole other level, because we have some rules and regulations that we were taught as kids that it's not okay to actually be in touch with stuff. So I help people get in touch with things like kind of old parts of themselves that they're using to protect themselves. But also, even those old parts have places, usually a mother or a father that doesn't even want them to know. If we have parents who had trauma in their lives, we will either have inherited that trauma genetically. There are all kinds of studies about epigenetic psychology, things like World War II, children of World War II concentration camp survivors having exactly the same thing going on with them. They studied it with mice, and they starved some mice, and the children of the mice act like mice who were starved. So there's this. Wow. So I have techniques that work with that. I have shamanic practices, because not only do we have unresolved feelings in our body that need to be released, and when we release them, that helps. and also kind of reprogram our memories, because what we're carrying with us is kind of an internalized parent. So we say we have an issue with our mother. That mother is long gone. It was your mom from 3 years old, is long gone.
Yeah.
But you're still carrying around this internalized 3-year-old version of your mother when you were 3 years old. But also, we shut off parts of ourselves. We kind of squeeze down some real wholeness. I just had a depression. Somebody I worked with depression who, and we did it in 4 sessions. Her first husband had abused her. Her second husband somebody had gone postal at work and murdered him. And she had depression for 21 years. And we did some of the stuff to release the emotions, but the really important thing was coming in with this practice of bringing in some energy that she had kind of cut off. And you could do it symbolically, and with some kind of piece of jewelry, I think we used symbolically. And when she put it inside her, I said, ask this, let's call it a ruby, ask this ruby what it needs for you to keep it. She said, you have to let love it. It says you have to let love it. And I said, are you willing to do that? And she said, no. And it was really interesting because, most of the time people say, yeah, sure. But in this case, after 21 years of depression, when she said no, we were able to do that work. Yeah. And when we did that work and she was able to let love in all in one session, she was able to, her depression went away. I saw her 3 days later. She said her son had no idea who she was. I saw her one more time and she said, and there was nothing to do anymore in terms of that kind of work. That's not entrepreneurs with goals.
Right. But still, yeah.
But still, it was like she had to remake her life because she was retired and she was going home and watching TV. And so she had to figure out what to do with herself now that she was ready to leave the house again.
Yeah. And with entrepreneurs, and with entrepreneurs, when they recapture this energy, they can leverage it. They can turn it into more business, more money, more life, more anything, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully the goal of this program is not just to get over what's going on, but to set at least one new business goal and one new personal goal, and then a second one, and either, depending on who you are and what you want, a second goal. And it changes people's lives to be able to, just the serenity that your life has, and the ability to handle things, would be to be more, you get to be more alive. Yeah. Most people are losing 5 to 10 hours a week on this stuff. And what's an extra, it's 10 hours a week. That's a complete work week.
Right. Every month. Yeah. That's like a 25% increase in productivity immediately. And probably the remaining 30 hours a week have become more productive too. It's not just a matter of what you've lost, it's what you're doing with what you already have. There's probably an exponential relationship there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, your time off becomes more enjoyable because you don't feel as guilty stopping.
Right.
You actually accomplish something.
Right. Yeah, that's a really important point, actually, now that you're saying that, because we all need time off. We all need to rest. We all need to be able to recharge our batteries. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs have a very difficult time with this. Like, even when they go on vacation, even if they take time off or travel and live this amazing entrepreneurial lifestyle they claim to on Instagram, it's incredibly stressful for them. And I've experienced this as well. Like I've been on vacations where I couldn't put the phone down, and I had to travel the laptop with me, and I had to get to a place where I could travel and like leave the laptop actually home. And that was a big step to do that, because I do think a lot of us feel anxious about what's going to happen if we take our eye off the ball.
That's true. And also our self-worth is so tied up to how well we're doing in business. So there's this fear of losing everything if you let go for a second. And part of what that has to do with underlying core wounds, which is, I have a process that's very standardized that I can put people through specifically. What's really cool about this is because you're learning a process, instead of relying on a therapist or another person, you begin to do these techniques on your own on a regular basis. And it's really nice. And it's kind of a practice. I mean, when I get up in the morning, I scan my body and I just look for, hey, what's going on here? And I teach my clients to do the same thing. And I teach my coaching clients the same kind of program.
That's fascinating. So that is something that's interesting, where you've reduced it, or not reduced it, but created a process out of it. I think we always say reduced a process, but I actually think process is an elevation. It's like you've elevated it to a process.
I've simplified the process.
There you go. There you go. What is it that Einstein says? If you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it well, or something. But
it's weird. It's cross-cultural stuff that I'm
interesting.
So like these shamanic practices that started the program that I do for that, I've taken what usually takes 5 hours in a whole day long workshop. I've taken the main piece of it. It's a 5-minute thing.
Wow.
It's a very simple thing where I have you imagine either a beautiful place with a table on it, that table that has a package for you, or maybe sometimes I like bringing kind of guides, like it doesn't have to be somebody real. It could be Glinda the Good Witch from the Wizard of Oz, but they're holding this gift box, and you see the box, and you open the box, and you take, and there's an object in the box, and it's the most amazing thing. Sometimes people need a little help with that, but most of the time people can find the object in the box. And then I have a series of questions you ask yourself, and you put it in yourself, and this energy that belongs to you, that you cut off because it wasn't safe. And you may not have even had like abusive parent or anything, but it's, maybe you ran in the parking lot and your parent got scared and yelled at you because you were in the parking.
No, I mean, there's all sorts of things that cause trauma or negative energy or blocking. I mean, yeah, absolutely. For sure. So this program, is it something that you are working with multiple entrepreneurs together, or is this kind of a one-on-one scenario?
This is a group coaching scenario.
Okay, so that's fascinating. So you're working with these entrepreneurs in group. Describe how that works. Like, what's the process there?
Well, the process is it happens over video.
Okay.
So I'm teaching basic ways. I did a lot of meetups for my hypnosis business where I was teaching these anxiety things. So the first step is you recognize how anxiety works, because most people don't understand that. Well, to put it very simply, it comes from our cave brain, the amygdala, which means almonds, so I don't like using that. It's a stupid word. It's Greek for almonds. Cave brain is so much better. But when you ran into a woolly mammoth and it almost ate you by yellow grass, the cave brain is smart enough to, when it sees the color yellow, to protect you, and you're going to have a panic attack. You're going to go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. So your muscles are going to tense up. Your heart is going to race, hopefully, so you can run the heck out of there, or you can fight the woolly mammoth. But in today's society, you would, if that happened, you'd go into the supermarket or you'd be on the road, you'd see yellow lines, you'd go to the Sherwin-Williams paint store, and you'd be traumatized. So partly we start off teaching how anxiety works. And first I teach first aid. Because what you want to do is lower the anxiety enough to continue. Because what the cave brain wants is, it wants to know that if you flee or if you freeze, the cave brain says, whoa, man, I am really good and really successful, and I just saved his life. Yeah. But if you show it that if you lower your anxiety enough, then you keep going with what's important to you, then the cave brain says, oh, this isn't right. Let me fix the software. Yeah. And so it won't send you anxiety symptoms anymore for that item. And, for some people, you may have to do that with a lot of items, but once you know how to do it, it works really well. But so that's part one. But part two is there's this core wound, because what it's protecting you from in the first place, that needs to be healed. So I teach techniques to kind of find that, usually using the body, usually using visualizations, and kind of heal that, because it doesn't exist anymore. We're just carrying this pre-programmed software to be really scared. The woman who was, I felt so bad for the woman with the Kavanaugh trial, who, you know, he had done whatever he had done 40 plus years ago. If you believe, I believed her, she seemed really, but even though she was working in kind of research psychology, she had never healed that wound. So she was constantly behaving as if something terrible could happen to her again at any second.
Right.
And so that's what anxiety does. And so when I work with someone and I can teach this system to connect to the core wound, move out the energy. So like things like the fire hose technique, sometimes I use magician's hats with the different handkerchiefs and pulling them out. I have a whole bunch of different things depending on how your mind works. And so you let go of that energy, but you also kind of reimagine a dialogue with that, because what you're carrying around is the other person, your memory of the other person. They don't exist anymore. Usually it's pain, right? And so this is an imaginary person, an internalized person. So I give ways to let go of that, to change that, to make a good version, or to just imagine that they go away.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're protecting that. Sometimes it's better to have a bad relationship with someone than to let it go completely. So I teach ways to do that. And once you've done it once, you begin to do it more and more. What I like about the coaching program is I get people really capable of doing this stuff on my own. When I work with my clients privately, they tend to rely on me.
That's really interesting, because in the group coaching space, one of the myths that I talk about all the time is that somehow if you go from one-on-one to group, it becomes less effective. You charge less. It's a lower value product. Like, in the business coaching space, there's a feeling of that. In personal development space, there's a feeling of that. But you're identifying that exact same dynamic with what you're doing as well, that in this group dynamic, people become more self-sufficient.
Ideally, and they, what I'm trying to do, this sounds really maybe a little egotistical, is I'm trying to create other versions of me. Because I do this work. This is part of my life. It's part of my practice every day, and it changes me and deepens me. And I unfortunately had a lot of abuse at a really early age, most of which I was unconscious of until it wanted to show up.
Yeah.
And so it's been a huge healing practice for me. What I find is that the deeper it adds so much to your life. A, you let go of stuff, but B, you also bring in kind of energies and empathy and the ability to connect to other people in a different way.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that you mentioned as part of the work that you do in your program is that you're also, once you're getting past, or once you've started to get past some of those blocks, helping people make goals and achieve those goals. That's also a part of what you do.
That's totally what I do, and it's part of the other work, because the idea is you begin to do stuff when something triggers you. Instead of feeling bad about the fact that it's triggering you, you can say, hey, my goal is to get triggered. My goal isn't to get, people have these fears that they have to be perfect. It has to be right the first time.
Yeah.
But if you change your goal to, I'm going to do this to see if it triggers me. If it doesn't trigger me, it's very easy to accomplish the goal.
Right.
If it does trigger me, then there's some work to do. And when you do the work, you get to break free of something that's holding you back. And eventually you accomplish things and you feel really good about yourself. And a lot of people I work with want to have a big impact on the world.
Sure. And a lot of those folks then will, and I suspect there's a correlation between people who really want to make an impact and people who have felt hurt, marginalized, abused. It's probably turning some of that experience and suffering into action. And what they really need to do is to figure out how to get past the things which are both motivating them and holding them back simultaneously.
Right. Well, because you get to heal.
simultaneously.
Right. Well, because you get to heal. You get to heal whatever. Yeah, a lot of people. There's this old phrase, the wounded healer. And so
Yeah, yeah.
if you heal the wound for yourself, you get to bring that ability into the rest of the world.
Wow, that's fascinating. I can imagine there's a lot of people listening to this who are who can really that this sounds familiar. The story sounds familiar to them. Is that a lot of us entrepreneurs are dealing with that.
Spend all this money on courses,
Yeah,
to create online products, et cetera, but they've never actually done it.
right.
Frank Kern will say that 98% of the people who buy his stuff never actually do anything with it.
True.
And part of that is because of these kinds of wounds.
Yeah, and so it makes sense to reprioritize when people are thinking about investing in themselves. It makes sense to reprioritize where those investments are going, because I do think that we, especially in the online entrepreneurial world, I do think that we're conditioned to think that everything's a sales and marketing problem when it oftentimes is not a sales and marketing problem. There's something else going on here.
Well, who you are changes how the world responds to you and how you respond to the world.
Yeah.
And the more you heal, the more challenges you're going to face. The challenge of being successful. If you haven't been as successful as you'd like, there's a challenge in being successful. If you have been successful and you're afraid you're going to lose it all, there's a challenge in, hey, what if it's okay for me to be successful and not think that I'm worth something only because of my success, or not be afraid to lose my success.
Right. Yeah. That's, that has got to be a very common fear among us entrepreneurs. That's got to be the case. Mahesh, unfortunately, we are out of time, and I apologize. It's a fascinating conversation, and there's probably a lot of healing that needs to go on among the folks who are listening to this. So I appreciate you sharing with us what you've done so far. For those people who want to dig more deeply into this with you, where can they go to connect with you? Do you have some place they can start?
Yeah, well, first off, I have 3 simple anxiety hacks for entrepreneurs that you can get at coolanxietyhacks.com.
Okay, cool. And that link, by the way, is below the video or in the show notes page. For those of you who are listening to this audio away from a device, come to the show notes page as well, and you can click directly onto that link.
And you can message me at you can email me at maheshgrossman@gmail.com. And for your audience, I'll let you text me at my 510-813-8004.
Wow, that's you've got the number straight to the man there. Great, that's very generous of you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending time and outlining this for us. Those people who want to connect more and get more information, they got the link. You've got his cell phone number to text directly to as well. Thank you so much, Mahesh. Really appreciate your time and attention to the topic.
My pleasure. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks so much. And thank you for being with us on this episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm Frank Bria, your host. And for those of you who want to connect with Mahesh on this, go ahead and click on the links in the show notes page or below the video. I do think this is a really important area. I think a lot of us deal with anxiety, depression, those mental health issues which are keeping us stuck. And since I happen to believe that entrepreneurship is the best ticket to freedom, I believe this is something that all of us need to take a close look at and make sure that we can move through in our own lives if it's keeping us held back, because we can't do any good helping other people if we can't move ourselves forward there. So thanks so much, and thank you for being with us on this episode, and we'll see you next time. All right, take care. Bye-bye.